So let us talk on pesticide registration, safety, and evaluations. We've already talked about evaluations. I will just give you in the end a sort of a summary on the evaluations. So let us focus on the pesticide registration itself. So our focus is on pesticide registration in Zimbabwe. We already know that pesticides, substances, contain active ingredients that do the job of killing the pests or which could be plants, insects or plant pathogens. They could stimulate or retard plant growth. Now these active ingredients are not supplied in their pure form. We know that they are formulated and can be classified into groups of how they are formulated. For example, we could have fungicides, insecticides, nematicides, acaricides, avicides, herbicides, abolicides, bactericides, molluscicides, and rodenticides. In fact, from the classifications, you can tell what sort of pest is likely to be affected or controlled by these pesticides. Now, pesticides are hazardous. Because they are hazardous, they require regulation in order to ensure safety and their efficient use. Probably let us look at who is actually involved in the pesticide business. It could be international organizations. It includes governments of importing and exporting countries. Government has to take a role. Manufacturers, trade associations, formulators, distributors, users, public sector organizations such as environmental groups, and probably to a certain extent trade unions representing workers who are involved in this industry. Now we want to look at how pesticides are regulated in this country. Zimbabwe has got pieces of legislation which tend to regulate how pesticides should be used in this country. Some of these acts are quite old and they are very useful. We have what is known as the Fertilizer, Farm Feeds and Remedies Act, Chapter 11 of 1952, Government of Zimbabwe, 1952. This act is administered by the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture and Rural Resettlement. Maybe they've changed the names. What is the importance of this act? It prohibits the sale or distribution of pesticides unless they are registered with the Plant Protection Research Institute, which is in the Department of Research and the Specialist Services. But from a practical point of view, if you move in cities, I mean in Harare, in CBD, you may find people selling, pesticides, actually advertising them. I'm wondering whether these pesticides come through this channel. I mean, you can get pesticides for using in households and many other, substances which are claimed to be very useful. There's also the the pesticides must be registered in terms of the Pesticide regulations of 1977, Government of Zimbabwe, 1977. Now we also have something under which is administered by the Ministry of Health on the one hand. So the two pieces of legislation, one resides in the Ministry of Agriculture, the other one in the Ministry of Health. The one in the Ministry of Health states that registered pesticides are classified in accordance with the Hazardous Substances and Articles Act, Chapter 322 of 1972, Government of Zimbabwe, 1972. And that act is actually administered by Ministry of Health. Now, under this act, the pesticides are placed in what they call Group 2 or Group 3 of hazardous substances and articles. Group 2 and 3. General Regulations 1981, Government of Zimbabwe 1981A and B. So this is how the regulation is stated. Now, the requirements for protective clothing, according to this regulation, have to appear on the pesticide label in accordance to the hazardous substances and articles. Protective clothing, pesticides regulations of 1985, Government of Zimbabwe, 1985. The amount of protective clothing depends on the toxicity of the pesticide. Whilst the piece of legislation administered by the Ministry of Agriculture may focus on the efficacy of the products, the Ministry of Health looks at the safety of using these products. Now, the requirement is that the pesticide should be registered in the country of origin if we are going to use it in Zimbabwe. Where it is coming from, it should have a registration certificate. If it doesn't have a registration certificate, it cannot be used, no matter how good it is. The application for registration has to be made by someone residing in Zimbabwe who is a representative of the company manufacturing the pesticide, who then becomes responsible for marketing the product in accordance to the regulations. All commercial formulations of pesticides for sale have to be registered. Anything to do with the pesticide has to be registered. If the weight or composition of active ingredients or any components of the pesticides are altered in any way, suppose we have been using that pesticide and the company decides to make some changes. Now the company has to apply for a new registration, or the product has to be re-registered because there have been some alterations. Now when the registration is being done, the information for registration should be contained. In other words, the company has to fill some forms. It's contained in what are known as the P1 forms. I shall supply you with some of these so that you just have a look at these things. You may one day want to use them. The P1 forms, which must be completed in triplicate and submitted to the registering officer in the Plant Protection Research Institute with the relevant data. Probably you may want to know that the current pesticide registration officer was one of our MSc students doing the similar course which you are doing. I'm not suggesting that you will get favors from the pesticide registering officer. Where applicable, 3 copies of the text of the label and 2 samples of the pesticide should be sent to the registering officer. Information on physical properties and toxicology from recognized published sources can be accepted. In addition, experimental data in support of claims made must be derived from experimentation over at least 2 or 3 seasons, with research conducted under varying climatic conditions for extension or new registration respectively. So if it is extension of registration, maybe 2 seasons are enough. New registration, 3 seasons. Now, extension of registration here refers to pesticides which are already registered in Zimbabwe, and the registration is being sought on probably new crop or pest. Maybe during the use of this pesticide, some new information has been acquired, and the company may want to improve on the registration so that farmers are aware of the spectrum of pests which are controlled by this pesticide. So registration of the pesticide is completed when a certificate of registration and the registration number are issued. So that will signify registration. There should be a certificate. There should be also a number for each pesticide to be used. Please note that the registration is valid for 3 years and has to be renewed by completing F2, another form, at the end of the 3rd year. I think when you are registering, I think the cost of the registration process, by 2012 it was around 200 US. I don't know now how much it is. And please remember that registration for the product is valid for 3 years. It has to be renewed, and possibly by also paying another fee. I'm not sure about that. Now, toxicological considerations, during registration. Normally they look at acute toxicity, results from the disruption of identifiable biochemical or physiological system. The responses are readily quantifiable. Chronic effects occurs when the organism is exposed to a repeated small and non-lethal doses, which we have actually talked about earlier on. And we also defined the LD50 as the amount of poison which kills half of the organism under test. And LC50 is the concentration of the pesticide in the water or air surrounding the experimental animal, resulting in 50% mortality. But normally we refer to LD50s. Again, here it's just refreshing from what we have been talking about concerning the LD50. This is trying to define what we mean by LD50, but we have already discussed it earlier on. Now, LD50 is in the form of numbers, but when you are now communicating probably with the farmers and users, you may not only want to use LD50 in the form of numbers. So we have in Zimbabwe categorization of pesticides. In Zimbabwe, color codes are used on pesticide labels to indicate toxicity levels. So the LD50 is represented by color codes instead of course, we put both the numbers and the color codes. Color codes makes it easy, to classify the product. I understand they are trying to review the use of these color codes so that they are, at an international standard with other countries. I'm not sure whether they will, how far they have done it. But up to now, we still have these color codes on our pesticide labels. Number one, the green triangle pesticides. These are formulations with acute oral LD50 greater than 2001. These pesticides can be used without danger in the home or where stated as admixture to grain. We can put it. We can put this in grain or stored produce for human and animal consumption. This can be offered for sale by any shop. We expect any shop to sell this or store. The word caution appears within the green triangle, and this phrase, harmful if swallowed, beneath the base of the triangle, you have this information. Now, protective clothing which are required when mixing are long-sleeved overalls and rubber gloves. So you can have this green triangle, change era in local language, something like that. So we have other labels in the local languages so that people can communicate. But otherwise, they may be in English. Amber triangle pesticides. These are formulations within the acute range of LD50 of 501 to 2000. These pesticides can be used in home gardens and for external use in the home. So they are not supposed to be used probably inside the home. These could be sold in a shop with a special part of the shop specified for dangerous substances. They cannot just be placed in a shelf anyhow. The word danger and a symbol of skull and crossbones should appear within the amber triangle, and the word poison beneath the base of that triangle. Now, what sort of protective clothing which is required? You also need long-sleeved overalls, rubber boots, gloves. This time you need also a face shield for proper protection. So this is the kind of triangle which is used. Now the red triangle pesticides. You can see the LD50 numbers are getting lower. These are formulations with acute LD50 of 101 up to 500. Their use should generally be restricted to horticultural, agricultural, or industrial pest control operations, and only applied in the home by a recognized pest control operator, where specific precautions are taken and the insecticide has to be registered for that particular purpose. So if a pesticide is in this range, we are not just supposed to get it, go and use it in our homes. We need a specialist to administer this pesticide. Only a licensed dealer can sell these pesticides. Not an ordinary, shop can do it. There should be a special part of the premises for the specific purpose of display, storage, and the sale of dangerous substances. So you cannot mix it with other products. There has to be a special place to do this kind of business. The word danger and the symbol of skull and crossbones should appear within the triangle, and the words dangerous poison beneath the base of the triangle. Again, protective clothing is now consistent: long-sleeved overalls, rubber boots, gloves, and face shield. So we have Gramaxone in this category. I don't know whether it's now paper or things could have changed. Now the purple triangle pesticides. These are formulations with now very low LD50, up to 100 milligrams per kg body weight. These pesticides may only be sold to persons whose business profession or trade requires them. So they should not be sold to any person. They may only be offered for sale by licensed dealers, just like the other pesticide. Where part of the premises is set aside for dangerous substances, the dealer must keep a poison register of all sales of this group of pesticides, each sale being countersigned by the purchaser and the farm license number noted. So if someone tries to buy this pesticide, you should actually be booked in a register, date when you have purchased the quantity, and so forth. The pesticide sold only for use by qualified personnel and may not be used by the general public. The word very dangerous poison and the symbol of skull and crossbones should appear within the purple triangle. Protective clothing, you need waterproof jacket and trousers. This is now waterproof, not just an ordinary overalls, rubber boots, gloves, face shield or hood, and respirator in some cases. So this is a serious pesticide. For example, this total could be one of the examples. Now, as for labels, what we require, normally we want labels printed in English, Shona and Ndebele, so that we can communicate with the smallholder farmers in communal areas. Of course, some may be in English. The purpose of the pesticide should be clearly stated on the labels. The rates of application should be indicated because they give direction of how the pesticide should be applied and handled. Recommendations in teaspoons, tablespoons should not be on the labels. Cups and so on. It should be very specific. Plastic measures should accompany the pesticide packs, and they should be well labeled. Safety intervals are indicated in bold type of color. All pesticide labels have triangle or approved color and centrally placed on the label. Labels are approved by the registration officer before they are printed in bulk. So if you want to use the labels, maybe you are packaging these pesticides, you need to have an approval of the label which you are going to put on the container. Now we move on to health and safety precautions. We have touched on health and safety precautions. The starting point is to know the LD50 or the category in terms of color where that pesticide belongs, so that you know whether you are going to use it or you are going to hire somebody who is a specialist to do the job. Protective clothing has to be used when handling pesticides. Waterproof jacket and trousers, rubber boots, gloves, face shield or a hood, and a respirator in some cases. The period between harvesting and spraying is critical. After putting a pesticide, how safe is it to get the product to consumers? without damage, without affecting them. Okay, we have protective clothing. We have triangles on the pesticide labels signifying the level of toxicity and also the level of protection which may be required. Now, when you are mixing these chemicals, you may need these tools: measuring cylinder, funnel, and so forth. You need to wash your hands and soap after handling pesticides. Washing the clothes, taking a bath soon after putting the pesticides, changing the clothes, make sure they are washed, wash your hands, etc. Pesticides should be stored in a locked place away from food. So these are some of the places where you can put pesticides under lock and key, so that you limit the access to these pesticides. Pesticide containers have to be destroyed and should not be reused as water containers. So we need to destroy. Now, even if we are going to bury them, I think because sometimes after rains you get leaching. You probably you want to do it in such a way that after rainfall there's not going to be any leaching of these chemicals into the water table. Eating and smoking are not permitted during spraying, otherwise one can get affected. So eating is not good. It's dangerous actually. To drink, whether you are hungry or not, you better stop. So please remember that there are always signals in the form of triangles to indicate how dangerous a pesticide is. That can convey information faster than writing the LD50 as numbers. And of course, we need protection when handling these products. Now, on the evaluation of pesticides, we can use laboratory to establish dosages that can kill the pest. We can also use glasshouse pot experiments, and we can use field trials. 3 seasons data is needed for registration purposes. You may find that the originators of a pesticide may start with laboratory, then glasshouse work. Then when they are sure, they do field trials. When they market, people may just start from field trials. so the process could be shortened at the end user. So this is it for today. I have to